beginner drone market for drones under 250 gram with 4K video and 3-axis gimbal, a couple of the must-haves for a good quality drone, just got a little bit larger with the Fimi Mini 3. But there's also a well-known competitor that's similar in size, has a great camera, is stable, and has lots of impressive features. But which one is better? Let's talk about it. So in this video, I'm going to talk about the Fimi Mini 3 and the Cogito Specta drone. But something I should mention right away is although I'm going to show the Cogito Specta drone in these comparisons to the Fimi Mini 3, keep in mind that this is the identical drone to the DJI Mini 4K and the DJI Mini 2. They're probably made in the same factory by the same people. There's a lot of conjecture why DJI did this. Maybe trying to skirt the looming ban in the US, or maybe a white label test to try to expand their market with certain products. I suppose only DJI knows for sure. Regardless, it's important to know that as far as performance goes, and even hardware, these are the identical products from DJI, just under a different name, so you can simply substitute names between the Mini 4K, the Mini 2, and the Specta Mini. For comparison purposes that we're doing today, they are the same product. Of course, the video quality is important. Most of us get a drone for that reason, so I will scatter video from both of these throughout the video, but I'm not going to show you which is which right away. I'm going to make it a blind test so I don't bias your view knowing which is which. So mark down the number of the video you prefer when it pops up, so when I do show it to you, you can see which one you actually liked more. With that being said, let's just jump right into it, starting with the physical size and the weight of both, which come in under that magical 249 gram weight and have the quality fit and finish. They are rigid, have similar size, and both fold to keep them compact for traveling. The remotes, on the other hand, are both charged via USB-C, have removable sticks, but this is where the similarities end. The Specta Mini has a more traditional design, being a larger square shape and weighing in at 390 grams, while the Fimi remote is smaller and lighter at 260 grams, which becomes more important the longer you hold it. And the device holder is built into the center of the remote as it expands with this little spring mount, so it accommodates the device, while the Specta has a traditional extending mount out the top of the remote, which does tend to make it a bit top-heavy, while the Fimi layout keeps the weight more evenly distributed in your hands. Neither of the remotes can accommodate a tablet directly without purchasing an additional adapter. However, I really do like to use a tablet when I fly. And there are available adapters that fit on the Specta directly. You can get those off of Amazon. So that's a pretty easy fix. However, I had to hack an old tablet holder I had to make it work on the Fimi spring clamp design. This did work pretty slick, and I use this Huge Rock drone tablet all the time. So it's possible with a little extra work to use a phone or tablet on either one. The battery life of the remote for the Specta Mini, which is actually the DJI RC N1C, and the Fimi Mini 3 remote are both rated at 4 hours, so both will make it through multiple drone batteries without needing to recharge. Continuing with the functionality, both have similar quick shots built in, including droney, rocket, circle, spiral, and boomerang, but the Fimi adds waypoints and visual follow to the lineup, where the Specta does not include these. Now, not only does the Fimi include the follow and waypoints, but the Fimi also has AI capability built in. And this makes the quick shots even better because it has subject recognition then, and honestly, it works pretty dang good. It keeps the subject in the center, and it's smooth as it moves through, although it did lose me once in a while, so it's not perfect. So if waypoints and a follow me are something you can't live without, might be a deal breaker for the Specta. They both have auto return to home functionality, but the Specta has a limitation where it will not perform a return to home if the distance is within 20 meters, which has caused me some frustration in the past. Personally, I think this is just plain dumb. If the drone is out 20 meters and refuses to return home, then it will simply land where it is. And if you're near water, for instance, it will likely be lost or damaged. In this regard, the Fimi has a huge edge because not only will it return to home if you're within the 20 meters, but because of that AI I mentioned earlier, it has a landing pad recognition as well, which it does work pretty dang good. In my test, I found that it did lose the pad maybe 1 out of 5 times, even though I did have a bright orange pad on asphalt. So it's not perfect, but it is pretty dang good. One other feature that the Fimi has that the Specta does not is built-in geofencing. Now this is really swapped from what it used to be. Specta just removed all the geofencing in a recent firmware update, so if you fly in areas that are unsure or controlled or restricted airspace, and you rely on this to notify you and prohibit you from flying there, then this might be a bonus for you with Fimi, or a deal breaker. I did try a brief test to fly in Class D airspace with the Fimi, and I did not receive a warning about flying there, so I'm wondering if it will only activate on certain areas at certain airports, for instance, but honestly, I'm not sure. I did reach out to Fimi, and they weren't able to offer a specific map for geozones, but they did say there was no way to unlock it if you did find one. I also saw in the manual that if you log in, there's access to, quote, dynamic no-fly requests, but again, if Fimi doesn't unlock these areas, I'm not sure what that means. On the surface, it seems like geozones are at least different than DJI used to be, but apparently some exist somewhere. And interestingly enough, DJI just decided in January of 2025 to remove all geofencing from their drones, so I'm not sure why Fimi would choose to include them now. I approach Airspace as my responsibility to know the limitations of where I'm flying, so I prefer not to have this feature. So it depends on your perspective if this is a feature or a bug for geofencing. Another important detail is the signal transmission range, and while the Fimi has a 9 kilometer or 5.6 mile distance spec, the Specta Mini has an impressive 10 kilometer or 6.2 mile spec. Now, in the US, we have to remain within visual line of sight, and both of these perform flawlessly within that range. But in an area that might have interference, it's always nice to have the strongest transmission signal possible. So if you do have some noise, it can possibly overcome it without having a problem. Operationally, they're both very stable and hover in place well, though I'd have to give a slight edge to the Specta for hover position. They both fly well and are responsive, and when I was performing a series of moves, both had really smooth movements. They both also have fine-tuning of the stick parameters available in the app to even further adjust this, and both also include adjustments on the gimbal control, so very similar there. Of course, with a camera drone, one of the most important things is the camera quality. And the Specta has a 12 megapixel sensor and the Fimi has a 48 megapixel sensor, but don't be fooled by the megapixels. The Fimi has a slightly larger sensor being 1/2, where the Specta sensor size is 1/2.3, and the Specta has a smaller aperture at 2.8, where the Fimi is 1.6. That being said, the specs on paper don't necessarily correspond with actual results, so I find it's better to test the cameras rather than rely on specifications. You've been seeing some of the video on the screen already, and these were all recorded in auto camera mode, so keep an eye on the numbers. I'll reveal which is which coming up soon. One thing worth mentioning is that personally I saw significant image focus degradation on the Fimi Mini 3 when flying in weather below 60 degrees F, which was a real problem for me. I did do some specific tests to prove this and actually heated the camera on the Fimi Mini 3 to see what happened. And I did this in a full Fimi 3 video, and I'll put a link up here in the description so you can take a look at that one if you didn't see that one already. If you fly in tropical climates exclusively, this likely won't be an issue for you. But in contrast, flying the Specta even at 10 degrees F showed no degradation of the camera quality or focus. One benefit of the Specta as well is because it is basically the DJI Mini 4K, which is basically the DJI Mini 2, there are various accessories readily available for this product that includes neutral density filters or polarizers that'll snap right on, where the Fimi does not have these filters available. And when I asked Fimi about it, they said they had no immediate plans to create them for this model. I would miss not being able to attach filters, especially polarizers, to the camera, so this is a drawback for me in the way that I fly. Something as well with the Specta, again, is because it is the same model as the DJI Mini 2 and the 4K, there's lots of adapters and different things that will attach to your drone and guards that are readily available, where the Fimi Mini 3 doesn't have that available yet. The video bitrate is exactly the same for both of these at 100 megabits per second, and honestly, this is really good. So under normal conditions, making cinematic movements, most users won't notice any difference in image quality based solely on the bitrate. The gimbal movements are smooth for both, so it's possible to get some cinematic shots, though I did see a bit of stuttering on the Fimi move. Now, this can likely be cleaned up easily in post with a program like DaVinci Resolve, but it's an extra step you need to consider if this is an issue for you. Horizon tilt is always something we want to look at in a gimbal drone, and really both were pretty decent. I did have a couple of instances where the Fimi had some significant horizon tilt, but it wasn't very consistent, so I wasn't able to catch it in the video. Most drones will have limited horizon tilt at one time or another, but I think both are good enough that any issues can probably be worked around in post if needed. The battery life spec on both is similar at 32 minutes, though in my testing they both had realistic flight time between 21 and 24 minutes each. I wish the battery life were a bit more, but they do have multiple batteries available, so that should help. The Specta specifically, though, is fairly sketchy providing spare parts, especially batteries. And this is one of the things that are not compatible with DJI, so if you can't get them from Specta, you can't get them at all, which is pretty disappointing, so you got to be careful with that. Lastly, I'll put the pricing up here for the packages, and Specta does come in at a lower price, but it lacks a Fly More package, and I always recommend to get more than one battery. And with the battery availability with the Specta being kind of sketchy, you got to decide if the Fimi adds functionality that you absolutely need, or if the Specta is a better value for you. And before I forget, here are the numbers for the videos that I showed throughout this video, and I'm interested in what you thought when you didn't know which drone was which, and if it changes your opinion now that you know which drone is which one. So let me know how you did in the comments. I'm interested to know. And I'll leave links in the description for the things I talked about in this video, and if you want to learn more about either or both of these drones, click on either of these videos and we'll see you there. Till then, good flying.